So thank you and welcome today for the next spotlight, and we're looking at UDL audits, and we have Maureen Haran in the room, and she's a lecturer in the Department of Social Science, and she's been working strongly in the area of universal design for learning. Maureen, I'll leave it over to you now.
Thanks very much, Louise, and thank you very much for inviting me today. I suppose the main reason I was invited to come in and speak today on the UDL audits was that the UDL audit was part of an initiative, one of the many UDL initiatives that IT Sligo has secured funding on from a few pathways, one being the National Forum for the Enhancement in Teaching and Learning. And there were several initiatives that actually were part of a bigger package within that particular piece. The UDL audits, though, in particular, Niamh Plunkett had spoken with Louise O'Gorman at the time, and this particular part of the initiatives really fell under iNOTE and Higher Ed for All. So that's, and part of the In the Spotlight talks, this is fits into the series for that reason. So in the Spotlight, so where were we? We've come a long way with UDL, and I'll explain to you where we've come from in order for you to understand why we visited the idea of carrying out UDL module audits in the first place. So back in 2017-18, we had information workshops. We had AHEAD, the Association for Higher Education and Disability. We had different representatives from their organization come to IT Sligo to talk about disability, to talk about the understanding and kind of building a foundation of UDL. We also invited two lecturers from the Athlone Institute of Technology who came on board and gave us kind of another layer of understanding a few years ago. Particularly though, what really launched UDL at IT Sligo was the UDL Digital Badges. So the HEAD organization and several UDL experts from around the country from higher education institutes came together to create the UDL Digital Badge. And that was a credential, a micro-credential for people who are interested to do continuous professional development in the area of inclusive practices within higher education. So I had linked with Dr. Lisa Padden, who really was the main creator of the badge from UCD. And Lisa brought me through the Digital Badge program that I undertook as well. And I saw the value in it, and linking with Niamh Plunkett when she started in the Centre for Enhancement in Learning and Teaching back in 2017 or 18. It was very near both. I think it was at the end of the year, actually, of 2017. But Niamh saw she saw the teaching and learning implications specifically, and saw that UDL really sat there as opposed to sitting in access, because it's really a teaching and learning framework about accessibility and inclusion. So Niamh and I decided to have Dr. Marion McCarthy come from UCC, who is another creator of the badge, and talk to our colleagues in IT Sligo about UDL specifically. And from there, we launched the first UDL Digital Badge. We had several participants go through where they looked at the content of their course. They surveyed their students to see what specific thing, was it an assessment? Was it was it materials? Was it part of the curriculum? What exactly could improve their experience? So based on the surveys, the participants then sought to make that change, implement the change within one module, just so it was just one change, one module, and then capture that in a case study and turn that up in receipt of a digital badge. So the following year, we had several more participants. 10 people attended the workshop and 5 completed the digital badge. And that particular cohort, Dr. Eilish Breen from Science, did a substantial amount of work. She did more than just the one change. And she then turned in her work in, she applied for the John Kelly Award, which was awarded by UCD at the AHEAD conference in Croke Park. She was shortlisted, one of 3, and it was, it was a very big, huge game changer for us, because Eilish was a huge champion in UDL, and her work really resonated with what we were trying to achieve. And a lot of her colleagues were looking at what she was doing and thinking, well, how can I make these type of changes where I can engage more students and in terms of inclusivity. So from there, I had one particular participant, Kathy O'Kelly from business. Kathy was very interested in this work. She did the digital badge with myself and found it to be very useful in her work. So we had kind of conversations going on back in 2019 and in that summer particularly. And I said, well, Kathy, you know, I'm really interested to try out something and I'm wondering if you're willing to go along. So what I did was I worked with Kathy on one particular module that she chose to have it critiqued, basically. So what I did was I looked at the inclusive audit toolkit from UCD that was shared with every institute in the country. And I looked at the CAST organization's guidelines and principles in UDL. So the CAST organization is more or less the home of UDL. So Dr. David Rose and Dr. Ann Meyer would be the people who did all of the research and carried out all of the work on UDL initially, and that is their organization based in Massachusetts. So a lot of this came out of Harvard University initially because that's where they're based. So I took the CAST organization guidelines and principles and I took the toolkit from UCD and I looked at it under the microscope of Kathy's particular module. So we met and we discussed what it was that she was doing with her module particularly. And I'm just going to move on to the next slide because it just brings us into that whole process. So with the pilot study that I carried out with Kathy, we looked at we had a pre-audit meeting and we looked at the work that she was currently doing and the representation on her Moodle page. So what her students were engaging with, all of the work through their tutorials, all of the work through the lecture that was, you know, the resources that they had access to, how they were able to submit their work, the assessments that she was carrying out, and she gave me a whole kind of picture of how this looks. And you need to do that. You need to have that conversation, because for the actual audit, when I look at a lecturer's Moodle page, I need that context. You know, I need their explanation as to what it is, because sometimes there's more of what's going on than what you can actually see on Moodle. So I took the pre-audit information and I then carried out the module audit, and I'll show you what that looks like in just a moment. So based on using the toolkit from UCD and using the information from the CAST organization, I had a very bare bones pilot that I carried out with Kathy, and we had then a post-audit meeting. So she generated a score. I'll show you in a moment, just there now, what it looked like. So this was the initial toolkit. And you can see it's very bare bones. And there's more pages than the 3 that you see in front of you. I think there were 7 in total, you know, when you include the CAST organization's information. So based on where Kathy came across with her module in terms of the assessments, the materials, and the delivery, you know, how accessible was her content for students that sit outside in the margins, if you like. How inclusive was her information? So I generated a score, and then we had a post-audit meeting, and that's really important because what happens in the post-audit meeting is that we discuss where she came across in terms of the assessment exercise. So there's ratings from 0 to 5, and based on the content that I could see and the information that I had previously, she was, you know, marked anywhere from a 0 through 5 in all of the different categories. So we talked about then, you know, where this sat, and it gave Kathy a chance then to inform me, well, actually, you know, this one piece over here under class and materials, I actually do provide, you know, it in more accessible formats because I'm doing A, B, and C. So we had that conversation, then we kind of readjust the overall score. But the really important piece from this was the recommendations. So I gave Kathy a ream of recommendations based on the shortfalls. And then she went away and she considered these to see where she could make changes to improve these areas. Now that was, you know, the initial pilot study. What that did was it informed a strategy for us, and it informed further initiative, which became the UDL module audits that I'm going to talk further about there now in a minute. But I want to just stop for a moment and talk about diffusion of innovation and how this correlates to the initiative. When you look at diffusion of innovation, This comes from Professor Everett Rogers. He's a sociologist based in the University of New Mexico. And his theory talks about new innovative ideas and how they can be adapted and how they're included in the first place. So he talks about knowledge, he talks about persuasion, decision, implementation, and confirmation, right? So those different areas that he talks about, when you have a new idea, such as UDL, that was a very new innovative idea to us at IT Sligo, you have innovators. So you had people like myself and Niamh who saw the, that there was good work in this, and it's a really important framework for educators to engage with, because you have people that are experts in their area, and now they're given a classroom to teach, but they might not have the tools, that you pick up from initial teacher education programs to be able to engage with all students and the diversity in the classroom. So you have the innovators, then you have the early adopters. Well, obviously, Ailey Spring and Kathy O'Kelly were our early adopters within IT Sligo. They saw it, they saw the vision, they saw how useful this was for their students and the engagement and what that brought to the students. You have the pragmatists. These are people who will read reviews, and they're buy early adopters about new products before purchasing. So they're the ones who will kind of test the waters and see what's going on and pay attention. We noticed that all of these different steps of the diffusion of innovation were what was actually happening with unrolling UDL within IT Sligo. So then we had the late majority. These are the people that decided when the national rollout took over of UDL back in 2020, and this last one in 2021, they saw that there was really good work happening with people who were engaging with UDL, that it was beneficial to their students and to their programs. So they were the late majority. They signed on eventually, and then we have the laggards, the skeptics, but you'll always have those anyway. But what I'd say to you is that it was very interesting to see this connected in this way. So this just happened to highlight things for ourselves in terms of initiatives. When you're rolling out an initiative, and when looking at initiatives and strategies, well, actually this diffusion of innovation, when you're looking at something, a new innovative idea, this certainly correlated to all of the work that we've done so far. And here's just a clearer picture of it. So I was talking about, knowledge, knowledgeable people who have the innovative ideas in the first place, and then you have the persuaders or the early adopters. They see the value in it, and then you have the early majority. These are the people who, like I had said, they read the reviews by the early adopters, and they kind of make decisions as to whether it's useful or not. They're the early majority, and then it moves on. I just thought it was really important to include this particular piece when talking about all of the overall work of the initiative, because it certainly correlates. And if you're looking at new initiatives, it's an interesting way to guide your steps as you go along as well, I would say. So when you talk about strategy, and the reason I'm talking about this is this all leads up to the UDL module audit. So when you're looking at strategy, it's written in the IT Sligo strategic plan, that UDL is I have in, I think another slide, UDL is sought to be embedded in programs within IT Sligo. So I had found this information about a study done in McGill University by Associate Professor Frederick Fauvier. Now, Frederick was our keynote speaker at the conference last semester. It was in May, it wasn't last semester, it was the conference on UDL. And what he had done was he carried out a study basically about change of efforts and change, in align with UDL and new and innovative ideas within higher education. And in particular, in relation to adopting a universally designed model of instruction, and the steps, particularly decision and implementation, account for the glaring gap in carrying out the social model of inclusion. So, UDL certainly sits under the social model of inclusion. And the study found an example of diffusion in relation to the decision steps and implementation, citing time and decision making, especially two key barriers. So that's really interesting. So when you look at implementation, we were doing a lot up to this point on the understanding and trying to build an understanding and getting people to engage with what UDL was. And then we were kind of at the crossroads of, well, how do we do this? How do we implement this? And all of it was organic. It was through initiatives and it was through buy-in from staff who saw the value in it. So, you know, early adopters were key for us in IT Sligo, but also the fact that the executive found this to be really important, that this was something that was considered by academic staff, you know, embedding UDL into your practice and into your delivery was, you know, sought to include all of students. But I just thought it was really important to highlight Fauve's work here because it correlates very much when you're talking about looking at strategy and looking at initiatives, because he says that there is a need for a broad awareness of the social model of inclusive education that include initiatives and strategies. So just a little bit of food for thought. But when you look at it played out, here it is. Here's our piece in the strategic plan. So it's 1.2, foster inclusion and participation for all students. And it's action number 5, embed UDL across programs with appropriate training and supports. And that's what we have certainly been addressing within these UDL initiatives is, you know, providing the appropriate training and supports. It also speaks to building national and international active research alliances in key areas. Current research being carried out in IT Sligo reaches its target. I'm actually carrying out my PhD study on UDL across higher education at the moment. So there's a lot of potential within this, and it spoke to that specific point within the strategic plan. And if you look at the CEUA proposition, use efficiencies and additional academic depth to enhance high quality learning options to students and support access and student success. It speaks to that area as well. So this teaching and learning framework has a lot to offer, as we've learned down through the years. So let's talk about the initiative, the UDL audit. So Kathy O'Kelly's initial groundwork with me in the summer of 2019 really provided a lot of great segues, because what had happened then is I had talked to Neve, who had said to me, you know, Maureen, I have an application in for funding from the National Forum for Enhancement Teaching and Learning. And I think there's a lot we can do with the work that you did with Kathy over the summer. So we looked at that and we said we can actually turn that into an initiative. And it spoke, you know, back to Fauve's, initial concern is that there's a need for broad awareness of the social model of inclusive education that included initiatives and strategies. So we said, yeah, let's start to look at initiatives and see how we can take this further and look to implement UDL now. We've done as much as we can to this point on the understanding, and now let's look at what we can do with the initiatives. So we applied for funding from the National Forum for Enhancement Teaching and Learning, and we were successful, and that was fantastic because we were able to not only work on the UDL module audits, but we were also able to look at module manager and how we can make, where you design in the first instance, how to make that more inclusive as well. So there was a lot of really useful changes implemented there. And then we looked at digital inclusion, and Ellen McCabe did a lot of work on digital inclusion and bringing in like the likes of Ally integrated into Moodle. And Ally is a system within Moodle where you can, a lecturer can upload their information to Moodle and it can be provided in multiple formats for students, which is a game changer for students. You know, if you have a Word document, that student can take that Word document and figure out how to, just within a few clicks of a button, they can have it changed to an MP4 where they can listen to that content. So it broadened what we were able to provide for the students. And within the National Forum Enhancement Teaching and Learning initiative, though, this particular piece, the module audits, we needed to be able to engage with a wider range of staff. And part of that was offering staff a continuous professional development voucher for the good works that they would do in the module audit, you know, for volunteering to have your module looked under a microscope and to look, you know, to see how inclusive it was. That's hard to do, to hand over your work to somebody and say, take it apart and tell me what I need to do. And that took a lot of trust. And so for people that came forward to do that, they were then asked after the audit to go away and to think about their recommendations. and to write a self-reflection, and that was part of that piece as well. So that funding was quite significant, and the iNOTE and Higher Education for All funding was able to lend to that piece, which made it such a successful initiative. So that's really important to mention here. So a call went out in autumn of 2019 for participation in the Module Audit project. And we had 31 lecturers participate in the module audit. Shelley Brady worked on this with me over the summer of 2019. These participants completed a self-reflection, which allowed for up to €500 in continuous professional development in a voucher form to be spent on a conference, a workshop, or a course of choice. And that was all obviously evidenced and provided through Neve Plunkett. But what was involved in this? So the process involved the same process that Kathy O'Kelly went through. It was the pre-audit meeting, the audit, and the post-audit meeting. So taking the toolkit from UCD and then taking the guidelines and principles from the CAST organization, which is this image here in front of you where it says engagement, representation, and action and expression. Those are the 3 principles of UDL. And within the 3 principles, there's guidelines. And this is very accessible actually on their website. If you click into each one, it'll give you the explanation of what it is, and it'll give you examples of how to include it too. So I took the 2, and with the help of Ellen McCabe, we created a self-assessment exercise module. So we did a module audit, and then we also did a program audit, which I'll talk to you about in a moment. But the module audit in particular was for this initiative. So every participant had all of their content reviewed against this toolkit. So, they were given a 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 based on the level that they were able to demonstrate or evidence that was available through Moodle. The pre-audit meetings and the post-audit meetings also contributed to this assessment. So some of the resources that are available, the module self-assessment that came out of all of that work that from the initiative is all available to students. To lecturers. So that is on the Universal Design for Learning Moodle page, and if you go down to the UDL module audit and you can click right into it there, any lecturer now can go away and use this as a self-assessment tool. So it's great because, if you're looking, especially right now, I know in my department, in the Department of Social Sciences, we're going under programmatic review. So if you're looking at your module and thinking, well, what else do I need to consider? Are there things that I need to consider in my assessment? Are there things I need to consider in my delivery and how the students represent their work? You can look at what you're currently doing and you can put it through a self-assessment. And it'll give you an indication of maybe, there's some things that you need to consider. So that's available to everybody. Everybody's linked to this Universal Design for Learning Moodle page. The other resource that I have here in front of you is the program self-assessment. And that's very similar in looks to the module assessment. This one, though, is designed specifically for a program. So, for programs that are going under programmatic review, this looks at, your program as a whole and how inclusive it is. And just, it brings you through a series of questions to consider. And you can, obviously indicate if you have, if you're extremely inclusive in this area, or if maybe you need a little bit more work in this area. But it gets you thinking about how you can seek to make your content on a program more inclusive. Okay, so IT Sligo's UDL involvement to date, the key thing that moved UDL further along for us was when the strategic plan took on UDL. So the strategic plan actions, management and leadership understood the importance of embedding UDL across programs. However, there was little involvement with staff from an operational perspective. So we had badges going on, we had different workshops going on, we were trying to create an understanding, but to get it from an understanding to implementing was a huge step. And the fact that the executive within our institute saw this and saw the value of this and what it offered for students and for staff, and being able to ensure that your work was inclusive and that it was evidence-based, because UDL is coming from the neurosciences. So that was really key. And rather than mandating inclusion of UDL across modules and programs, the approach taken differs from that of other higher education institutes, insofar as that UDL is considered from a bottom-up as well as a top-down perspective. So we have successfully met in the middle, and a lot of that is thanks to the UDL working group. While the UDL was deemed important by senior management, getting staff involved at an operational level through establishment of a UDL working group increased collaboration, increased motivation, and hence faster innovation. So the strategic plan involving UDL, that was very key. And also very equally very important and key was the establishment of the UDL working group. Because once those two kind of went in tandem, everything else started to develop and started to follow suit. So the next thing we know, within IT Sligo, we now have many champions, as they're termed, national UDL champions, right across the institute. The national badge really exacerbated that as well. So we had, many colleges throughout the country trying to do a little bit where they could. Ours, certainly, I was producing more badges in IT Sligo than, I think I was second to UCD, and Lisa Padden rolls that out there, and would have been one of the creators of the badge. So we were certainly very grasping this from the very start and taking this on board. We were very progressive from the very start with the involvement of the badges. So a result, a more holistic and systems approach that has resonance with staff and a relevance to improving the learning environment for students. Approximately 80% of academic staff have a constructive understanding of UDL principles, and the UDL working group plans and actively promotes the UDL across the institute through a variety of communication tools, workshops, UDL Digital Badge Attainment, and active engagement with UDL related projects and research. Now, the Digital Badge Attainment, as I had mentioned before initially, different facilitators, national forum facilitators of the badge, were carrying this out in a few institutes across the country. The national badge rollout with the head in UCD really took that number and opened it and offered it to such a wider audience. Last year, I believe there was over 500 participants in the badge program, and this last rollout, 2021, I think there was over 1,000 that have enrolled, and as of this morning, 771 have successfully completed the badge, and many of those went on to do the facilitator's badge as well. So, as part of the national rollout, with my experience, myself, and there's four other colleagues in the college that are national facilitators on the national rollout, or facilitators of the digital badge. So what we do is we work with other colleagues, either whoever we're really assigned, whether it's in our own institute. Many of us get the groups from here for St. Angela's First or Letterkenny. I've had some this time around from the medical professions. I have the Royal College Surgeons. I've engaged with colleagues as well from UL last year and NUIG. So we get different cohorts of colleagues from around the country, and it's great because what we're doing is we're sharing practices. And we're understanding and learning from each other what works well, what approaches work well, inclusive approaches to teaching and learning. And we're all learning from each other. So the results have been absolutely fantastic in terms of IT Sligo's UDL involvement. Many of the people who completed the digital badge rollout last year participated in our UDL conference last May, the CUA conference. And the results there were absolutely amazing. You can go back. I have another slide in just a few moments that gives you directs you as to where you can find that particular conference. You can listen to what our colleagues have done and see what they've implemented and what changes they've made, and see if it resonates with you. And usually it kind of sparks other ideas or turns on a light bulb, and all of a sudden you see that there's things that you can do to include in your own practices. So the results have been absolutely amazing, and it's not stopped there. I'll get to that in just a moment. Okay, so in the spotlight, the UDL audits, and where to next? So I've talked about where we've come from when I had said, so where were we? And I gave you a little bit of a flavor of the timeline in terms of what's happened with the initiatives and what's been happening in our own college and around the country. But what does, where does all this lead us? What's going to happen next with all of this good work? Well, we do realize that this is a very practical teaching and learning framework. Many of our colleagues are experts in their field, but they're not necessarily coming from, initial teacher education programs where they were educators in the past. So it's very difficult it can be for some, very difficult to pin your work or figure out what really underpins your work. What is the framework or what is the theory if that's something that you've not been exposed to? But many of us look for practical tools to ensure that all of our students can to relate with the work that we're delivering and to understand it and to be able to unpack it in their own terms. So what's going to happen next? Well, IT Sligo is just recently the executive has agreed to support a higher education UDL Centre of Excellence. This is kind of expected to be rolled out maybe February, March of this coming year. And that's really exciting because the new centre is going to do so many different things. So it's going to be working with staff in IT Sligo, giving specific supports. Many of our staff say, I don't have the time, or I'd love to be able to do a little bit more, but I need to know a little bit more about this grounded theory to be able to unpack it properly. Many of us have done the badge, but have only looked at a little small spotlight in a corner of one little module, perhaps. So the centre is going to look at supports. It's also going to look at what we've been doing around the country, and it's going to centralize some of those efforts. First within IT Sligo, then within the CUA, and then with national collaboration and the possible establishment of a national centre in UDL. So there's a lot of good work that's going to come out of this centre. This person will be, or this centre, these people, I should say, it's going to include lecturing staff, instructional design staff, admin support. So there's going to be a whole team that's going to collaborate with the UDL working group in order to make sure that we're scaling efforts within IT Sligo, that we're not duplicating the work around the CUA, so that the efforts that the things that we've done within IT Sligo can be easily replicated within other institutes within CUA. Not only that, there's a lot of research that goes with this, and there's connections that can be made with other organizations around the country too. So it's really, really exciting piece, and it's going to be based here in IT Sligo. I'm currently working with Lisa Cadden and Trevor Boland, and myself and Niamh Plunkett and Breda McTaggart and Brenda Feeney. We're all collaborating on a new special purpose award, a UDL Level 9 postgraduate certificate on designing inclusive curriculum, and this is going to be starting in September 2022. So this development is actually underway. We've just completed the EAP1 form, that we're going to establish a new program, and we're completing the background documents and research and market research and all of the things that go into that at the moment. This is going to be based in the Department of Social Sciences. It's under CELT, and it's going to be 2 modules. One is the understanding of UDL and the grounded theory, and really taking a deeper dive on that and looking at the neuro research and how all of these things play out together. Then semester 2 is going to be implementation of this practice within your module. Or within your, if you're a PMSS staff, if you're looking to do this as well within your trainings or workshops, however you engage with students. So this would be looking at a deeper dive. It's a great start, the Udl Digital Badge, if you've never had an understanding of this before, and it really sets the backdrop. So our pool of students that will potentially be coming onto this program are going to be coming from, likely going to be coming from the UDL Digital Badge, either within IT Sligo or the CUA or nationally as well. There's nothing like this nationally offered under teaching and learning specifically. So that's going to be happening. So what did I write there even? I think I've already spoken to it. The SPA currently being designed is made up of 2 modules. First, understanding the fundamentals of UDL, and 2, implementing UDL in instruction and assessment. The idea is that to date, the Udl Digital Badge has scratched the surface and gets academics thinking and considering ways in which this framework can be beneficial to their teaching and the student experience by asking participants to make one change, which we recognize sets the mindset for educators to continue to practice in this way. The Special Purpose Award is a deeper dive and will guide learners to closely examine the theory, principles, and guidelines, as well as provide rich evidence of their implementation within their practice. And that's the difference. That's really a big difference. Then the Digital Badge asks you to look at or consider one change, whether it be through delivery, whether it be through your design or your assessment or your materials, just one change, and to evidence that and to capture that and write up a short case study. Whereas this will be looking at an entire module and really picking it apart, going to Module Manager and looking to see how it was written, how it could be written. This can be an aspirational piece as well, but there's going to be a lot of information coming out about this in the coming months, so just keep your eye on that as well. So some more information. I just want to signpost you to the correct places if you're looking for more information. The first person I should probably signpost is myself, because I'd be more than happy to meet with, and I often do meet with people one-to-one on Teams and discuss some things they're thinking about with their module in terms of UDL considerations. Other people, wanted more information on the inclusive audit. So let me just explain to you where you can find some more information. So the Udl Moodle page, if you go under Universal Design for Learning in the drop-down on your Moodle page, every single staff member is connected to this. So you can go into that section of the Moodle page, and there's several different tiles on there. Some talk about UDL and programmatic review and things that you can consider, and resources there, several resources there. I talk about the principles. I have information up on that. There's information that Ellen McCabe has up there on the digital piece of UDL, digital inclusion. And Shelley Brady has on there as well, I believe, a video on the module manager piece on inclusive curriculum. So when you're designing, and so there's a good bit of information there, as well as the UDL and module audits. So what you can find on there is your own self-assessment. So you can work away and figure out how inclusive your module is. And then if you want to seek one-to-one supports, you can certainly get in touch, and that's something that I can look at with you. I can, you can show me how you fared out, and we can talk about it, and I can talk about some of the things that may be beneficial for you to look at in terms of recommendations. Also, one of the tiles is that you'll find is a CUA conference 2021. That there's a link. This link, Louise will have this. You can access it from here. Louise will have these slides. So our conference last year was very successful. Over 500 people nationally attended, and it was a great day of engagement and looking at the practices of UDL and across several different types of programs and what people are doing, and just sharing best practice. So our upcoming CUA conference is going to be the 26th of May. Minister for Higher and Further Education, Simon Harris, has agreed to open our conference in person, so he's coming to IT Sligo. He has a specific interest in seeing UDL developed and implemented. He did tune in, or he sent a video last year to our 2021 conference, so it's really exciting to get him in person this year. So that's going to be happening, and you'll be getting loads of notification about that upcoming event, and another hopefully another nice goodie package that everybody really enjoys so much. Recently, under this program, the iNOTE and Higher Education for All project, GMIT worked with IT Sligo and Letterkenny. It was a CUA collaboration on a digital ed book of cases on building digital teaching and learning capabilities in higher education. So all of the information regarding the UDL initiative that myself and Shelley and Ellen have all worked on, that's all here. It's in this publication. Other projects that Neve has worked on with other colleagues of ours from around the college, they're also in here. The digital ed piece that I think GMIT let out on, that's all in here. So it's a great digital tool to look at, to see what's been done collectively across the CUA. So there's more information there. So my resources are here. What I will point you out to a really good resource for anybody who's considering, finding out more kind of initial information before you take a badge or before you look at the SPA, and you want to just kind of get your head around some of the understanding the fundamentals initially. And this one here, this Gordon D, it's actually a publication that includes Dr. David Rose and Dr. Ann Meyer, who I've already told you have established the CAST organization. And that was one of the first publications that they came out with, and Universal Design for Learning, its theory and practice. That gives a really good explanation as to where this is coming from, and it's kind of sets the scene. There's others here, that relate to some of the things that I've mentioned today, but that's a really good one to get started with. Universal Design for Instruction, a Framework for Anticipating and Responding to Disability. That's another good piece to read. It's a journal article if you're interested in that one. I do have other publications if people are interested in looking at the idea of UDL across higher education. There was a publication across several different European institutes, including, I think it was UCC and UCD, that came out with a publication a few years ago and aspiring to implement UDL within third level education. So I can point you that direction as well. Also, here's the Toolkit for Inclusive Higher Education Institutions from Vision to Practice. That was Dr. Lisa Padden and Anna Kelly. That was their publication that I referred to earlier on from UCD as well. And of course, the CAST organization website that I had mentioned previously. I should have it up here, and I apologize, I don't. I have it, I think, in another slide. But that website has all of the principles and all of the guidelines, and it's extremely interactive. So you can click into the different guidelines, and it'll give you examples. It'll explain what it is, and it'll give you examples of how you can possibly consider it in your own practice. So that's the spotlight on UDL audits for this time out. If you need more information and would like to just discuss anything that I went through here today, please do get in touch. It's my communication is my email, and it's Haran, HARAN.Maureen @itsligo.ie. Take care. Thanks very much, everyone. Thanks. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Maureen. That was brilliant.